Hello everyone, welcome to the Electricity Canada's Conversation Series. Electricity Canada is the national voice for sustainable electricity for its members and the customers they serve. My name is Farhan Mirza and I'm pleased to be your host for today's session. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I'm broadcasting you from today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. I'd also like to recognize Canada as the land of the First Peoples, Inuit and Métis. We'd like to pay homage to the Indigenous peoples past, present, and future that continue to work, educate, and contribute to the strength of our country. I would like to recognize that this land is shared through historic treaties, developed through contemporary treaties, and one that continues to be unceded territory. The Conversation Series features presentations from Electricity Canada's corporate partners, and the series will highlight a variety of Canadian and international solutions to current and future challenges faced by our industry. Working with our partners, these webinars have been developed to be of specific interest to those working in the electric utility space, from generation through to the customer. For a list of upcoming sessions, please check out our website at electricity.ca. Before we get going, there's a few housekeeping items I'd like to go over. Our session today is scheduled to run from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Questions can be asked, and we'd encourage you to do so by typing them into the questions function on your screen. They will be asked at the end of the presentation. And a brief survey will be sent to webinar participants following the session today. We very much appreciate your candid feedback and interested in any topics you'd like to have covered in the Conversation Series in the future. Lastly, please keep an eye out for future webinars and events through our monthly newsletter, Current Affairs. With over 6,000 subscribers, Current Affairs is the place to go for Canadian industry news as we connect the national value chain from generation to the customer. If you'd like to receive Current Affairs, you can subscribe to this free publication by going to our website, again, at electricity.ca. All right, today on the Conversation Series, we'd like to welcome our guest, Util-Assist, who will be talking to us about next-gen AMI, advanced metering interface, and unlocking the possibilities. With the first generation of AMI nearing end of life, utilities are starting to explore the many innovations that the next generation of AMI brings to improve operations and the customer experience. Before embarking on your AMI journey, educate yourself on the benefits and possibilities. You'll hear from Alectra's EVP of Experience on the utility's successful next-gen AMI procurement, and from Util-Assist on lessons learned from recent AMI projects across North America. This webinar is a practical primer to kickstart your planning for AMI, the AMI initiative, from business case through to deployment. To welcome our presenters today, we've got John Forsyth, Director of Business Development at Util-Assist, James Douglas, the EVP of Customer Experience at Alectra, and Doug Eagle, Lead Consultant at Util-Assist. Gentlemen, welcome to Conversation Series. John, to kick things off, I'll turn the webinar over to you.
Thanks, Farhan. I'd like to thank Electricity Canada for allowing us to speak today about latest generation AMI, a topic very close to our organization and to many of those on the line, I hope. And I'd like to thank everyone who's joining today. Can we go to the next slide, please? What we'd like to chat about today was really about how next generation of AMI. Sometimes you'll hear the term AMI 2.0. You can't really go to a manufacturer and buy, hey, I want your AMI 2.0 meter. It's really just another term for latest generation of AMI technology that the vendors are providing in the market today. And while we're going to talk about a lot of the capabilities that it enables, there are benefits to the operational side of the business as well as the customer service side that we can kind of explore a little bit today. We can also, we'll chat a little bit about some kind of capabilities around smart cities that are also enabled by these latest generation AMI platforms. Go to the next slide. Again, we want to touch on a few key topics today to leave you with some valuable information. One is around how this latest generation of AMI is changing the utility business and what it offers. A little bit about how utilities are planning their procurements. Talk about some of the success factors for next-gen AMI projects, and some great information from James on relating to Alectra's next-generation AMI procurement project. The speakers today we've already talked about, so we'll go to the next slide. Just a real quick primer on Util-Assist. As you can see from the map on the left, that we have customers across North America. And we have well over 100 utility clients that we're doing business with. Our business is focused solely on the electric utility industry. So again, we have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge in that business. We were founded in 2005 when that first generation of AMI was being deployed in Ontario, and we assisted with that. And it's given us a lot of knowledge over the years about AMI projects. We currently are over 160 employees as well. I'm going to pass it over to James to give you a bit of information on Alectra.
Thanks, John. So as you can see from the slide, Alectra is Ontario utility, 1 million customers. It actually generated from 5 utilities merging into one. And with that, we have today, and we'll get into more detail, 4 different AMI1 vendors that we deal with, great partners. So as you can see by service territory, it is a dense urban marketplaces that we service. And we are the 2nd largest municipally owned utility in North America.
If we go to the next one. We've included some polls today to get some, to share some information with the audience as well as to get your opinions and feedback. So Farhan, can we go to the first poll? The first poll will be, what are your biggest challenges today? If you could select any or all that apply to what you're seeing as you look at AMI 2.0 and what's driving you to maybe consider an upgrade, that would be great. So looking at the results, the devices reaching the end of their useful life or their obsolescence seems to be a big driver. Data and network limitations seem to be, again, a fairly significant limiting factor. Increasing costs to maintain infrastructure. And there's still a fair number of clients who don't have AMI yet that are just embarking on this journey. So appreciate the results of that. And we'll go to the next slide. James, if you could give us a little information on the challenges you're facing as you looked at AMI and the latest generation of technology.
So I think the poll question actually highlighted a lot of it. It's it's that increased aging infrastructure, and with any technology from an aging infrastructure side, we're going to start to see increased failure rates. So it's looking at that to understand, most importantly, with the path that we're trying to go at Alectra, and we call it Strategy 2.0, and how we actually support the electrification and transformation. Will our existing AMI assets enable the capabilities we're trying to do from a customer side and an operations side? So with that, what we start to look at is we said, hey, the capabilities within our legacy platforms aren't going to take us to where we're trying to get to. There's obviously supply chain constraints that have been happening, and there's all limits around the data and the network itself. So from that perspective, it was a journey we began back in 2005 when we deployed our first AMI meters. And in 2019, we did our business case, and we started down that path in 2019 to say, hey, based upon our Strategy 2.0, and I'll touch on that in more detail in coming slides, what do we need to look at with our AMI 2 replacement strategy, and what capabilities do we need, and what business case benefits and so forth are we capturing? That was a big exercise, but it's one that when you have an aging infrastructure, it's one a bridge that you have to cross, and it's one that we have to be able to address and articulate to the regulator as to why we're going down our replacement path. So on that, as part of Strategy 2.0, is from our side of it, we're looking at this investment to say, how are we setting ourselves up to enable the decarbonization, decentralization, digitization of the actual, next generation grid. So for ourselves, we looked at it and we said, we need better monitoring and control at the grid edge. We need to be able to look at and understand what prosumers are going to be doing, advancing investments within their own home, and how does this technology allow us to make sure that We're enabling the reliability at the grid edge with enhanced load there, monitoring of those transformer loads, understanding if there's a supply risk of how we can actually enable those devices behind the meter assets, such as battery storage and so forth, and or demand response events with the EV assets, so that we can actually maintain that reliability on there and also set up opportunities for customers to participate in those markets. So that's where we saw that AMI2 and its capabilities had to be an enabler of that. And that's where we had to make sure there was strong stakeholdering internally to understand those requirements in order to set the path of, we saw with AMI1, it was a 15, 20 year use of that asset. Great partners, great assets that we had. And so with the replacement strategy, how is it setting up to meet the challenges that are coming our way in the marketplace?
So maybe let's just step back a little bit and kind of have a little primer on next gen AMI technology and what capabilities it brings to the table. So if we go to the next slide, a great analogy is a device we all have and we use extensively today, your cell phone. As you look back at the early days of the cell phone, you were pretty happy if you could make a voice call and do some basic text, which was awkward. That was kind of the feature set that it started with. When you look at the cell phones today and the types of things you're using them for, it's expanded dramatically. When you look at video conferencing, streaming services, voice and text, social media, it was hard to imagine that if you step back 15 or 20 years as to what you can do today with a cell phone. And what's driven that has been the hardware, but also memory and computing power. So as you expand memory and computing power, the number of things you can do grows exponentially. And who knows what that evolution of the cell phone might be in another 15 years. Like, it's hard to imagine at this point. But technology does change, customers adapt. And the one big thing that you see today is that when you're using your cell phone today, every cell phone is customized to the individual. Versus before you were using, a standardized package. With the creation of apps and customization, that's really something that's driven, and that's what customers are expecting in the future as well for any type of technology. If we go to the next slide. So you can take a similar picture with early generation of AMI compared to what's available on the market today. Especially if you look back to Ontario, what was deployed here 15 years ago, it was pretty basic. That AMI meter had fairly limited functionality and capabilities. It was your basic energy and demand for billing purposes, maybe a few channels of interval data, some basic alerts and time of use rates. It supported some basic outage information, and it had fairly limited bandwidth to do a lot of other things. And again, a lot of that was limited to the technology at the time, again, because of memory and computing power. So looking ahead, what's available today in the latest meters, and there has been a tremendous, we'll call it an arms race at the endpoint, which is the meter, of adding more features and functionality and capabilities. And that's driving the market at this point in the metering space. But now you have all those basic things covered from that early generation of meters, but now you can support more advanced rates, meter to cash, remote disconnect, reconnect as a standard feature, supporting distributed energy resources. Some utilities had to go out and change a meter on a home, let's say, if someone put a solar panel on it. Now every meter can support that, can support things like monitoring EV charging as well. A lot more channels of data are coming out of the meters. Some utilities are using, it used to be maybe 2 or 3 channels of 60-minute data. Now you're getting 15-minute and 5-minute data. Sometimes few channels on a residential meter. Commercial meters could have 8, 10, 12 channels of data. So the amount of information coming has grown dramatically, and that allows you to pass some of that information on to your customers through advanced portals so that they can have access to that data as well. But beyond that more core stuff, there's also the AMI 2.0 platforms provide a foundation for other capabilities that support your business. So things like advanced analytics using the operational data. You're not just getting, watts and kilowatt hours, you're getting volts, amps, power factor, waveform capture, a lot of other capabilities now that the operational side of the business can utilize to run the grid better. You're supporting evolving consumer expectations by giving them better, more timely information on their energy use and how they're using, power outages, those types of applications where customers expect to be informed now, not to have to call you to find things out. The networks also support advanced capabilities. So the same network that's reading the meters can also do smart city type capabilities or do distribution automation or other types. So you're getting better value for the platform when you deploy it. The biggest advance is probably around this edge computing space. Sometimes some vendors will call it apps in the meter, but it's allowing the devices at the end to have more computing power so they can perform tasks and do measurements and talk to one another. That helps to bring visibility to what's happening out at that edge of the grid. And again, you're also getting improved outage detection and restoration detection. So that's an improvement to both customers and to the operation of the utility. But even with what the capabilities we have today, it's hard to determine, hey, what am I going to need from that device, that endpoint that's out there in the field 15 or 20 years from now when it's still working? So having flexibility is important because it's difficult to anticipate what the demands will be, similar to that cell phone example we used earlier. We'll go to the next slide. And again, if you go and you say, what is AMI 2.0 or what is the latest generation of AMI? There's no pure definition for it, but in general, it tends to encompass some of the things around this chart when you're looking at it. We'll start off with the cybersecurity piece. There's a lot more threats and in the world today, and having more enhanced security to protect both the network, the devices, and the back office systems is imperative. So that's evolved over time to provide greater security and protection, which is very important, especially if you're using the networks for other capabilities like distribution control. You definitely need that security to protect the system. Again, as we mentioned earlier, distributed energy resources, we see that playing in the utility space. It's going to grow. More people may deploy solar, wind, or other types of battery storage out at the grid edge. Being able to monitor and manage that is critical. And the AMI 2.0 platforms, you don't have to go out and change the meter. It can support that in every home. So if anybody wants to move in that direction, you already have a device out there capable. The reliability piece, getting better outage detection and information, power quality, sag information, voltage information helps with the reliability side. We already talked about the network being able to be used for multiple purposes, giving you greater value. But there's also an element that the data coming from the smart meters can help with your smart grid strategies and enablement by feeding other applications with information from the grid edge. Again, giving you voltage, current, power factor, other types of power quality information that could be shared with your ADMS system, your OMS, so that they can make better decisions on how to automate the grid and manage the grid. Most of the AMI 2.0 systems, everything is moving more towards standard-based applications, whether it's the IT side or the network side or the device side. Moving towards standards just opens the door for reducing costs and interoperability capabilities. On the customer engagement side, we touched on a few things there, and I'll touch on a little bit on that in the next couple slides. But really the advancement is this idea of distributed intelligence and being able to customize any given meter to do certain feature sets that might be important to that customer. And it's out at the grid edge. It's happening, could be happening in real time or near real time, so that you're getting visibility to what's happening at the furthest reaches. Most utilities had very good SCADA systems that gave them visibility to the substation level, but after the substation out to the very edge of the grid, there wasn't a lot of visibility to what was happening. Excuse me. On the analytics side, by bringing back more data, more channels of data, and more capabilities, you're again enhancing what you can do with analytics to bring value to the business. And that is that's been another one of the great features that we see utilities now that they've had AMI in place, they're starting to leverage analytics to bring benefits to their business. And the last one was just the ability to do demand response, being able to control loads like water heaters, pool pumps, or even EV chargers so that you can better manage the grid, maybe provide incentives to customers to participate in programs. So when someone says, is it AMI 2.0, it's tough to say yes or no, but in general, these are the types of features that are embodied when you're talking about next generation capabilities. We'll go to the next slide. And we're going to do another poll. Paran, if you want to bring it up. So we're just trying to understand which benefits are most important to your utility. You know, things like enhanced customer experience, optimizing operations, grid modernization, smart cities, or is it just the basic meter to cash stuff that's important to you? So again, different utilities have different priorities, but we're just trying to get an understanding of the audience and what their thoughts are. So it looks like there's a bit of a grid modernization is definitely the top priority. Optimizing operations and enhancing customer experience are kind of number two. The basic meter to cash stuff, which is very important, the cash register of the utility, that's third. Smart cities is still an emerging thing. It's in its very early days. You know, we've done some work with some of our utility clients around smart cities, and again, there's interest, but it's still emerging. So that's a thank you for the results on that. So when we're talking about next gen possibilities, if we can step through this slide to the first one. When you deploy an AMI 2.0 system, you're deploying the endpoints and you're deploying a canopy over your territory, a communications canopy that you can leverage. On one side, there's operational benefits that it brings by deploying this, that we've talked about a number of these, that help the operations team and the planning team to better manage the distribution network. There's also customer side benefits. If we could bring those up, the next slide. And these are things that enhance the relationship with the customer so that you're getting a better, the utility is looked at in a better light from your customers by providing either programs, services, or information. And then you'll see in the middle, under the brackets, that there's some capabilities that, some of the capabilities support both sides of the organization. Things like distributed energy resources and supporting them as they're deployed. Having visibility to that is important to the operational team as well as customers who want to participate in programs and see what the effect is if they installed solar panels on their home. Things like outage detection and restoration, again, benefits to the operations team when they're rolling trucks out to know the size of the outage, which customers are affected. But also on the customer service side, now you can inform customers better around outages and providing information to them about restoration times so that they are informed versus having to call the utility to find out things. Another application that we see that benefits both sides of the organization is load disaggregation, and that seems to be an emerging application or capability that seems to garner a lot of attention these days in the utility industry. When you look at it from the operational side, it can help you to determine where customers are deploying, whether it be heat pumps or EV chargers, and giving them visibility to where that's happening behind the meter. On the customer side, the benefits are if a customer receives a very large bill, now they can maybe go on a website and see, well, hey, what caused my bill to be high last month? Was it the air conditioning? Was it, hey, we turned on the pool pump or we added a hot tub? So being able to determine what loads are behind the meter can help both sides of the business. And that's AMI 2.0 is unlocking these possibilities to improve the business across the board, not just the meter to cash side of it. The last one that we'll talk about is smart cities. Again, this is emerging, but there are some utilities that are looking at, hey, the business is tough these days. I'm looking for new revenue sources. And they're looking at AMI systems as maybe an opportunity to sell services to, say, municipalities around, hey, I can help you to control your street lights and manage your street lights. I can help you with traffic management or smart parking or, smart building controls. So having that canopy or network over your service territory allows you to leverage it to maybe do some advanced things. Maybe you're not ready to do today, but maybe down the road, they might be important things that increase the revenue for the utility as well. So that's kind of trying to give you a glimpse. There's a lot of capabilities and features that are still emerging. This is a very relatively new area, and the capabilities are being developed as we speak. So this is a snapshot of some of the important things we're seeing out there today. If we want to go to the next slide. I'm going to hand it back to James to give a little bit of his thoughts around Alectra's vision for where AMI 2.0 or next gen AMI can take them and what's important to that utility.
Thanks, John. So let's walk a little bit on some of the problem statements that we're looking at. So with electrification, our operations team has been doing load studies and so forth. And right now, what we're in our forecast, what we're seeing is that the impacts of EVs and electric heat and so forth is that around by 2040, it's a 2 to 3 times the demand that we have on our distribution network today. So we are looking at this to say, so how do we tackle this? Like where are the prudent investments that we have to go in so we get that social license with those investments to actually, we're doing it in a prudent manner and we're spending in the best interest around reliability and affordability. So when we looked at it, we said we need stronger monitoring and control at the grid edge. And what we're seeing with the AMI2 vendor communities out there is that, that access to those distributed intelligence is giving us, in the past, it was around 1 hour data. And when we do analytics around 1 hour data, it would allow you to solve certain use cases. But now with the next generation AMI2 investments, it's around 1 second data that we have access to, which then gives greater trust with the information that is being, whether it's related to disaggregation, whether it's related to detection of, level 1, level 2 chargers. Like even to detect level 1 chargers that a customer is using helps the customer experience of understanding the business case associated to moving them to a level 2, different rate options. In Ontario, we have the ultra low rate. So it's how do we, become that trusted energy partner? We need to have stronger analytics to frame the data in ways that make sense for the operations room, make sense for the customer. But in order to have stronger analytics and trusted analytics, it comes down to, can we get to a higher granular data set in order to support those use cases? So that's what the grid edge does. So from that perspective, it's important. So we looked at it also to say, grid edge monitoring control, critical to us in order to support strategy 2.0. We also looked at it and said, we have to make it so that, we go to those standards that John had mentioned and look at it to say, how do we get this AMI2 asset to get more to a standards base, such as say YSUN and so forth, so that as the vendor communities keep rapidly evolving their technology, we're not exclusive to a single vendor. We can put certified assets onto our network and keep moving forward with the industry. And then last but not least, to add to that is that how do we make it so that we're not just vendor dependent on enhancing capabilities? That's where these app communities, whether it's our own development of one, whether it's the vendor community's development of one, that we can allow more rapid evolution of technology so that we can take advantage of this more granular data and identify the use case problems we're trying to solve and how we can use those new investments in AMI2 to be a critical tool to enable it. And one of those examples that we're looking at is that it's trying to understand, the impacts with EVs. So it's looking at to say, in order to assure and make sure that we're enabling EVs to go in and maintaining that reliability level, it's, that transformer monitoring is critical for us. So how do we have the AMI2 assets perform that transformer monitoring, understanding impacts to the transformer, and then having logic within the grid edge and basically decision making within the assets, that when it sees thresholds being hit, that we can actually shed load within the home based upon rules already set with customers, whether it's an event being initiated by the distribution company to protect distribution assets, and or it's an event from ISO trying to resolve supply issues. So how are we able to, if it's transformer related, initiate the event in the home to disconnect or throttle back the EV charger? So it's this all takes the new technology in order to go down these paths. Our problems are changing with the rapid involvement of EVs, and those loads that I mentioned before, about 2 to 3 times by 2040. When you look at utilities across the US, those studies are being updated annually, and they're seeing that what they had as their forecast and the impact of those, from the previous year, it's changed. It's jumped as to where they see where the load's going to hit us, and that's the balancing act that we're trying to do on our side. It's making sure that we are going to be replacing 1 million meters on our side to the next generation AMI assets, but we're doing it in a prudent manner so that it's solving those that have failed new connections early, and then as we finish through our rate cases and work with the regulator to implement it, the replacement strategy, so that it's enabling the electrification side of it. We're going at a pace that meets our capital requirements and our capital envelopes that we have. But most importantly, it's what we realize is that we get one shot at this with the hardware, and that's the biggest thing that I'll emphasize to everyone, is that by understanding your use cases, and when you dive down this within your business cases, we're not buying all the bells and whistles with our AMI2 platform. We're going to have specific business cases for each one of those applications that I discussed to make sure it proves out and makes sense for the investment. But what you have to realize is that you get one shot at the hardware that gives you that capability to support that evolution that you're trying to achieve. So that was the biggest one for ourselves internally, was to analyze that. What do we need the hardware to achieve to make a 15-year investment window? And that's where these elements of grid edge computing are important, because just like with the phone that John had mentioned, the phone's there to enable it, but it's the different app that was loaded on it, like what will be, the Candy Crush of apps related to the AMI2 investment. And there's rapid evolvement in the industry there. We're working with the utilities in the US to keep up to date on what use cases and applications they're developing to solve their problems, working, communicating with Canadian utilities on that, so that we have to keep in touch with each other so that we can, really rapidly expand the evolution of the technologies to understand that whether it's a voltage monitoring, whether it is related to basically connectivity modeling, there's a lot of different applications that the vendor communities have available to us to take advantage. It comes down to what are the pressing problems that are preventing us to achieve our strategy or to enable strategy 2.0 on our side. We've listed a few use case examples here just for you so you can understand it. But I think the key thing is for us is that one, standards based, so that we can make sure that this investment, we're not limited to just the vendor's proprietary network and or capabilities, grid edge capabilities that allows a community and of developers to actually enhance capability, and then understanding that hardware selection, because that, monitoring and control in order to support the EV and the electrification activities are coming our way. The AMI2 asset is a critical tool for us to achieve it, and then also to, again, complement the customer with that affordability angle. They're investing in their homes. They have behind the meter assets that can help solve the problem on reliability on the distribution network or the supply issues within a marketplace as it keeps moving. And then how do these AMI2 assets enable and help the participation of that in a more near real-time angle.
Okay, thanks, James. I'll jump in, and I'm just as a reminder, I'm Doug Eagle. I'm a consultant for Util-Assist, and I've advised and supported a number of different utilities on both their procurement of AMI technology as well as deployment. So I have 4 slides here that I just want to go over, and what I'm going to focus on is the how. So I think maybe I'll just quickly summarize what we've just heard. We've been hearing from both John and James on what the next generation technology is and why it's beneficial to the utility. And so I'm going to spend 4 slides just talking about how we actually get this technology acquired and in place at the utility. So I've titled this, if you already have AMI 1.0 or already have AMI implemented, you have 2 options, obviously. You have 1, status quo, and 2, go back to the market. And I know there's 25% I saw of our audience here that doesn't have AMI yet, so I think you're going to be focused on the go-to-market. I've listed some benefits of both of these routes. There is going to be pros and cons to both, but what I really wanted to highlight based on my experience is that any decision that you're going to make on AMI should be driven by a business case. So, each utility really needs to determine what the best path forward is for them. You're going to have some unique requirements, and you're really going to want to make sure that this investment is going to align with the utility's long-term strategy. So the business case is key, and I'll just highlight a few reasons why that is super important. So one, we've touched on it. This is one of the largest investments a distribution company can make, right? It's a very significant investment financially. It's also a very significant and critical component of the utility smart grid. So you want to be thoughtful and plan this out and make sure that you can develop a positive business case for all those benefits that you can achieve through this. If you're refreshing a business case, it is also a good opportunity to refresh your technology roadmap for the utility. Just keep that up to date. If you have a 3-year or 5-year technology roadmap, you'd want to just ensure that it aligns with the current business objectives and strategy of the utility, as well as you want to make sure that you're leveraging the latest features and functions of that AMI technology. It also helps, this activity will also help coordinate and engage with multiple parties across the utility. So I find that's important to highlight, because if you did go through that legacy implementation, 15, 18, 20 years ago, you're probably focused on some of the basic, early cell phone as the analogy technology, and you're focused on meter to cash. We've just reviewed all those new and latest features and functions that benefit. The benefits are across the organization, operationally, distribution management, touching the customer. So it is a great opportunity to engage all the different business units, lines of business across the organization. So I guess just to summarize the point I wanted to make on this slide, the importance of doing a business case, even for option 1. And if you already have AMI and you're leaning towards, staying with the same vendor, you're relatively happy, but you just want to evolve your solution, it would be prudent to consider doing an RFP anyway to get some, competitive analysis, potentially opportunity to renegotiate your SLAs and contracts. So either way, it would be helpful to do a business case or RFP. Next slide. I think we have a poll here. Yeah, so if we can just put the poll up. Right, so What do you think is the typical timeline for an AMI procurement? And we have some time bands here. I'll just give you a couple minutes to put your answers in. And the reason why I like to ask this question up front is because it is typically one of the first questions that we talk through. Oh, nice. Okay, so we have 18 to 24 months is the most common, followed by 12 to 18 months. I like it. It is the first. I'll just go to the next slide. That's great for that insight. This is typically the first question that we talk through when we engage with utilities on procurement. And quite often they're surprised by the length of time it takes. So this simplified Gantt chart of a procurement is what we typically use as a starting point. So the starting point, we consider an 18-month implementation, but there's a lot of different factors and considerations that will make that, quicker or longer. So I can just highlight 3 or 4 of things that may impact your timeline here. First is complexity of the RFP. So you could do just an AMI. You could build in, an MDM procurement or a meter installation vendor procurement or system integrator procurement all together. You could do that in series or at the same time, depending on your utility's unique needs. Depends on your readiness as a utility. So do you have your business case prepared? Are your requirements defined and clarified? That type of scenario. Flexibility on, say, the terms and conditions. So that the very bottom arrow there, master service agreement. The writing might be small. It says master service agreement and SOW negotiation. That's the contracting phase. And I've seen those phases last, a super quick one might be 2-3 months. I've seen them last over a year, just if you're doing a lot of back and forth with the vendors on terms and conditions, service level agreements, warranties, all that kind of good stuff. So that can change. Oh, and the final thing that I wanted to highlight was one big thing that impacts the duration is resourcing at the utility. This takes a lot of work, takes a lot of focused effort, and typically on a procurement, you're going to be trying to draw on some of the utility's most experienced staff, and they're still trying to maintain a day job. So having a resource plan to do that procurement is a must. Next slide. I have 2 more slides. On the critical success factors for AMI procurement. I'm not going to go into all of them. I'll just highlight some of the ones that I think are the key or most important. I'll start with the bottom one, plan early. We say what we typically suggest to a new utility is AMI procurement can take 5 or more years from conceptualization through deployment. And if you think you're doing a business case for 6 to 9 months, you're doing a procurement for 18 months, you're standing up and doing the systems integration for another year, and then you do a mass meter deployment for 2 years, you're very quickly building up to that 5-year time frame. So planning is definitely key. I'll highlight the one top right, consider AMI infrastructure that goes beyond the meter. These latest next generation solutions are evolving, and there's a lot of different features and functions that we've reviewed. And also there's a lot of more use cases that require integrations with other systems. So traditionally, maybe you've just integrated with an MDM, but now you would want to consider integrating with an OMS or ADMS system. A lot of utilities now have a data warehouse or a data lake that is their prime repository for analytics and reporting. And since we're getting so integration heavy, there's quite a few utilities that employ Enterprise Service Bus as a middleware to manage all of this. So lots of considerations there. The other one I'll highlight is standards. We touched on it earlier, but as this gets more and more complicated, you're going to want to focus on evaluating the vendors based on, some of those cybersecurity standards, interoperability standards. All those will be critical to the AMI procurement. And next slide. I'll touch on the AMI deployment. And so a few things to highlight here. Develop a comprehensive system integration strategy. And so that's super important. As I said, there's so many systems being integrated now. You could hire a third party if you don't have that system integration expertise in-house to help support that activity, but just remember that we're getting more and more complex in the systems integration that we're employing here. Bottom in the middle, develop a detailed deployment strategy. Deployment, what I'm referring to, is building out of the communication network and deploying the meters. And I know we're getting a bit short on time, so I'll try to go a bit quickly here. There's a couple things that I just want to highlight when you're deploying this latest technology. One of the unique things of so now in AMI 2.0, you could be in the situation of replacing existing AMI communication infrastructure. And there's going to be some unique considerations based on that. We would recommend having your new communication network devices and infrastructure deployed, 6 to 12 months before you think you're going to start deploying the meters. You want to have that umbrella that John was referring to up and ready because you're going to want to change those meters quickly. The other thing I'll suggest is you're going to want to plan those meter deployments within areas based on more of the communication requirements, making sure that you can get the reads back and there's a mesh forming securely and robustly, as opposed to based on geography. And your first go around, you might be trying to aim for a super efficient deployment based on geography, but communication infrastructure is key here. And so those are some critical success factors. I think I'll pass it back to James and he can share some of Alectra's lessons learned.
Sure, I'll go quick here just because respecting time. So I think the big one you probably have heard it is the plan ahead. This is for us. We began our exercise in 2019 with the business case to our first meters of our AMI2 asset going in Q4 of this year. So it's make sure you're planning, you're taking all that into consideration, and the other side of this is the big picture. So this is internal stakeholdering is going to be critical on making sure that you understand the business goals you're trying to achieve. It's making sure that where you realize of where decisions can get made at later dates and which ones you got to get right off the bat. And the hardware was the example that we brought up there. The other one on this one is on the, work with other utilities on this. Look for other utilities. That helps you with volume. It helps you with negotiating best warranties, best service levels, and so forth. And the procurement is everything on this. Like when you go through the procurement exercise, you're setting up the playing field so that everyone is bidding to those equal needs on what is the performance level, what is the service levels, what are the warranties that they have to supply. So this is when you're in your strongest power position. If you can go to the next slide. And remember that technology is a point in time. So what we procured, if you're going out to marketplace next year, the vendor communities are constantly leapfrogging each other on their technology. So just remember that it's get those requirements clear, understand it's a point in time, a purchase, and so make sure that you realize that and that you're getting the right fit for your utility. I'll go to the last part there is just on the big data one, is just basically looking at this to say, just like anything when it comes to big data, there is analytics that can be performed in the cloud, and there's analytics that you want to be performed at the grid edge because you need more basically granular data to support it, and or the timeline and latency that is required in order to support the use case. So I think it's looking at that to realize that, again, is this investment going to enable you to look at data from a big cloud perspective, grid edge, and have events being sent up? And because that is, there's a lot more data, and then that data elements that you see from the grid edge when it achieves what the use case is, you're going to have to make sure your design of the network is allowing the throughput of that in order to support your needs as a utility. And if we can jump to the next one, because I know we're getting close to the end here, is this one is about, walk, don't run. This is a journey here. This is a critical asset to the utility, and it's one that is a very large investment. So it's making sure you're taking the time that it deserves to make those right decisions. The contract negotiation phase is going to be long, but that's where you need to make sure that you can showcase what did we learn from AMI 1, how do we protect ourselves with AMI 2, so how are we making sure that this asset and the terms in there will benefit both the vendor partner and the utility to be successful for this next 15, 20-year relationship.
So just summarizing some of the key takeaways from today. Again, we believe that this latest generation of AMI sets the foundation for a lot of opportunities that can support your evolving business needs. If you get the decision right, you set yourself up well for the future. Developing a business case and capturing the funding to support future benefits is important. Engaging partners to help you through this. Most utilities only do this once every 15 or 20 years. So having someone who's does this more frequently, understands the landscape, the market, what the vendor's landscape is like, is important to make sure you make the best decision possible. And last of all, what we found with a lot of utilities and their projects is that to unlock the full value of it, you have to have a longer term deployment plan that goes beyond just the meter to cash functionality. It's taking advantage of like things like analytics, like some of these greater capabilities that benefit operations or the customer service side of the business. You have to have a vision that encompasses those additional feature sets as well, and not just stop at meter to cash and say you're done. I think that's it. Hopefully that you've taken some information away from this, and I think we'll open it up with Farhan to the Q&A section.
That's fantastic, a plethora of information. So thank you so much to our presenters for taking us through that. We have a few minutes for questions, so if the audience would like to type in any questions, we'll try and get to as many as we can with the time that we have. So we'll jump right into it. So we have a question from the audience here during the presentation. With AMI 2.0, is the meter data sent in real time, or is it collected once a day like the AMI 1.0? And they mentioned to the head-end system.
I'll maybe take that one, and Doug and James, you could add if you want. It depends on the configuration a lot of times. Like a lot of AMI systems now may bring back data every 4 or 6 hours. Most of that data is not time critical. It's interval data, it's consumption information. It doesn't need to be there in real time. There are some capabilities for real time or near real time, let's say, ability to move like certain alerts and alarms or certain functions that are happening, that they can move through the system fairly quickly. If you're using, say, an AMI network to do distribution automation and controlling devices, that can go at a higher priority over the network, let's say. So again, a lot of it depends on configuration. Not all the data will be real time or near real time. In general, you want that consumption information is not critical. It'll work its way back through the system. And most of the time, I think you see setups where it's between 4 and 8 hours as to how frequently the meters report back is fairly common.
And I'll just add, yeah, that's a typical. Sure. It's not one size fits all. It's a typical conversation topic and decision point during a discovery phase. There is technology available to do it in more real-time fashion. There is, trade-offs in terms of performance and latency and bandwidth. Most commonly, as John said, like the bulk of the interval reads, meter reads would come through 3 or 4 times a day, but there are other scenarios where you might want select meters, like say bellwether meters, for example, to come back more frequently. So.
All right, we have another question. Are there any use cases that you can share? The ones that you did in the presentation?
Sure, yeah.
Any specific ones that come to mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of use cases. And yeah, so we went through kind of high level grouping of use cases in some of those slides, and then there's additional lower level use cases that would go underneath all those I guess features and functionality areas.
Yeah, so for us there is use cases around, say, transformer monitoring and so forth. That's where that connection to the utility community is important for us. It's understanding partners in the US, partners in Canada, what are the different areas that they're using, what are they seeing with the real piloting out of some of these more advanced capabilities, and then how is all that being captured in the business cases. So definitely there's a lot of different use cases out there, and how are those use cases feeding into updating and improving business cases to justify the investments.
Awesome, thank you. How will AMI 2.0 connect behind the meter applications? Will it still use Zigbee?
So on the different vendors, they do it differently. And for us, it was going down that standards path. So 2030.5 is a standard that a lot of the vendors will actually follow, and they have different options. There's Wi-Fi now. There's Zigbee. There's other means to reach into the home. So I just make sure that you understand the options that your supplier will give you, and because it has evolved from what was available in AMI 1.0.
Awesome. Couple more. Is last gap signaling now a standard part of AMI technology? In other words, is meter level outage reporting now a standardized offering?
I would say yes. All the vendors would have some sort of functionality. They may not call it last gasp, but there is outage detection available in the latest generation of metering.
Okay, excellent. And what about interoperability? How do these new apps work if you have meters from diverse set of vendors?
So that's actually one, make sure that you address within your procurement, because it's new in the industry. So with each vendor, you'll see that they'll have their ecosystem of apps that they have developed. And then we see that maturing. So traditionally it's the third-party vendors. They have that app working with multiple AMI providers. So that's what we look for when we're talking with, are we trapped with this solution, or do we have flexibility to evolve down the path? So it is a great question and requirement to make sure you're covering off based upon your needs and your procurement.
And I'll just add to that, in addition to interoperability related to apps, you also want to consider interoperability between the systems. And there's standards out there, even ones like multi-speak, for example, a web service-based standard that was developed specifically for the utilities industry. If you can, ask the vendors whether they support a certain version of multi-speak standard, you are trying to de-risk the potential of having web services that aren't communicating, or it would reduce your development time if they're all following a similar standard for web services. Then you have a reduced integration time.
Awesome. We are almost at time, but maybe just to conclude, Alectra, I wanted to thank you guys for coming. Maybe you can comment on what stage you're at in your AMI deployment right now.
Yeah, so as mentioned in the presentation, we are deploying our first set of AMI2 assets at the end of this year. And we're going to be doing a slow rollout. We're focusing on failures, new connections, and so forth. And then once we've got approval for the mass rollout with the regulator, then we'll be increasing the pace and speed of that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate coming. I think that brings us to the end of our session. We've run out of time for questions. Thank you to our audience for sending in those questions. To wrap up, all of our futures events and webinars can be found in our monthly newsletter on current affairs and on our website under the events section at electricity.ca. In closing, thank you again to Util-Assist and Alectra for joining us and sharing that plethora of knowledge on advanced metering interface. This concludes today's session. We'll talk to you next time. Everybody stay safe. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.